So in continuing our discussion of educating students with disabilities inside the Catholic context, one of the phrases that I use a great deal in my work is a phrase, disability is a natural part of the human experience. These words come to us from special ed law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. And I don't think there's a better group of words to describe our students with disabilities. Disability is a natural part of the human experience. And while that language comes from a public law, when we think about those words and that statement within a Catholic context, it makes a great deal of sense. Disability is a natural part of the human experience. When we think about ourselves and the students that we teach and the people that we love, we think about human dignity and the inherent dignity that all people have. And in exploring that idea and thinking about that idea of dignity, we very often think about the idea that we were all created in the image of God, each one of us, all of us as teachers, all of our students, all of the people that we care about, our families, the people we work with, we were all created in the image of God. And if God is perfection, then every individual created in His image is also a representation of perfection. And so thinking about that related to disability as a natural part of the human experience, no individual with a disability is any less or any more or any different from any of us because we're all created in perfection, and that disability is a natural part of our experience. I know I've said that a lot now. If I was a cartoon character, the thought bubble above my head would be disability is a natural part of the human experience. But to me, this just makes all of the sense in the world, that the dignity of each individual is the same. And so students with disabilities who are often set aside or set apart, we know from countless studies in psychology and sociology and education that we as individuals think of ourselves the way that we are thought of. And so if a student with a disability is set aside and told they are different, they're going to feel different. But if students with disabilities are included and made a part, then they feel a part of. And really, as a Catholic community, that's what we should be getting to, making all people, all students, all of our family, all of our colleagues, one body. And so this idea, disability of the natural part of the human experience, I think really extends our conception of why students with disabilities should be educated in a Catholic context, because those individuals are as much a part of our schools and our families and our workplaces as anyone else. And so why wouldn't we seek out opportunities to engage those individuals in the same type of self-development that any other individual would be engaged in? And the beauty of our ability in Catholic schools to be able to look at each person as a brother and sister in Christ and a son and daughter of God, we're able to recognize that individual dignity, that innate dignity, and understand that not everyone has to be the same. Not everyone has to be treated the same. Not everybody's outcome will be the same. And so as we're able to look on to that student who maybe has a specific learning disability, maybe has an auditory processing disorder, maybe has an intellectual disability or a physical disability, we can understand that their innate dignity does not have to be equal to anyone else, that their outcome doesn't have to be the same as anyone else's. And so I remember a case of a student who had an intellectual disability, and he was in high school. And this was in the early days of No Child Left Behind, in the early 2000s. And the school system had done a pre-assessment in the fall, and any student in the high school whose skills in algebra weren't at a certain level had to take 2 sections of an algebra class each day. And so I thought of this friend who had an intellectual disability, did not really have the ability for abstract thinking. And we know that you can't really do algebra without abstract thinking. We can memorize formulas and use formulas, but to really understand algebra, we have to think abstractly. And so this individual at that point in his life didn't have the capabilities to do algebra or to understand algebra, yet for 2 hours of his day he was engaged in that study. When he probably would have benefited from a business math class or a life skills math class. And so within the Catholic schools, we can look at individuals with different needs and address those needs. Instead of looking at education as an assembly line where all the students get on when they're 5 or 6 years old, and then 13 years later they get off with the same set of skills. I think we have some freedom to address that dignity in a way that honors both our image as a model of perfection from God, and this idea that disability is a natural part of the human experience.